Hey, Susan.
Hey. Okay. Okay, we're not all here yet.
Hey, all.
Hey, Matt.
I'm cooking dinner, so I'm staying off video for the moment.
Hey, Katie, can you hear us?
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Okay. Hey, Katie.
Awesome.
Hello,
Awesome.
hello.
We are. Oh, I see. It's both. It's Katie, the phone and the name.
Yeah.
But it's one.
Yeah.
Got it.
I'm in them both. So sorry, you still don't have a
No.
quorum.
You're in a
Thank
vote
you.
or on a vote?
Thank you. This I know was short notice, but and this should be a short meeting as well. But based on the things that were voted on last month, there do need to be some changes made to that based on newly discovered information. So I think, though, we do have to wait for David, who's holding us up.
He said he was going to be on, didn't he?
Yeah, and is
Yeah.
Kristen as well, right?
And Kristen, I haven't heard from her that she's not available. I mean, so we will see. But definitely because, David's been, David has issues specific to this. I mean,
Oh, okay.
I was going to say, is this a general statement, or are we?
Yeah, there was a pause, but yes,
We'll let him speak for himself when he jumps on.
Yeah, I think yeah, he is self-explanatory, isn't he?
I'm leaving that one there.
Just leave it there. It's right.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God. Carter, I don't know. Did David send? He sent me.
Yeah, I didn't have
portions
a chance to look at it yet. But
I just had a chance to look at it briefly, and he is like off base.
okay, well, I'll let you share that with him.
Well, yeah, I guess I'll have to. Hey, Patricia, unmute yourself so we may hear your wisdom.
You. Thank you.
There you are.
Yes, I think there were just, well, besides Kristen, David. And I just like, I mean, although give him another minute or two, and then I think we can, if we'll just start without him. In fact, he called me and asked me what time, and I said 7 o'clock. So, yeah, I mean, where is he? Where is David? No text, no nothing. Well, what is this? Anyways, since while we're waiting for David, I just wanted to let everyone know that Carter had brought to my attention there were two things in particular that we need to reconsider, to the amendments that we had put forth and that had been voted on and approved. The first of which is the idea of a secret ballot for our elections. Oh, here's Kristen. I'll wait a second as she connects. Hey, Kristen. Can you hear me? I see no indication that she can hear, but anyway, as it turns out, based on the opinion of Adele Barrett, who is counsel to the borough president, our decision to make our elections secret is a violation of the open meetings law. So we're going to have to reverse that and restore it to, status quo
Well,
ante.
wait a minute. Susan, may I say something?
Absolutely.
I have no problem with doing that, but there are other community boards with the same situation where this is not like new.
I know, which is why I felt confident in supporting this, because having looked at the bylaws of other boards, it's like we weren't alone in wanting this. The truth is, they apparently are also they're in violation. I mean, this is actually something we didn't bring to Adele's attention at this call that Carter and David and I were on this afternoon, but it should be brought to their attention that these votes need to be, the results need to be accessible to the public, just the way the votes on any resolutions that we pass are accessible. This is not considered, I was in error in looking at elections as a purely internal matter. It's not interpreted that way. And based on what I've seen of, and this information apparently is accessible through a FOIL request. So we really do not have a legitimate basis for doing that. And it's not worth the controversy. I mean, except frankly for David, who was the driving force behind this, I would recommend that we simply restore it. Any thoughts?
He doesn't want to restore it?
He has a very strong, he's really committed to this idea. He feels that, I guess, he has been personally harmed by the use of votes in the past, and he does cite there are other individuals. Thank you, David. Since we were waiting for you, I was bringing them up to speed on the situation with the secret ballot, and I was explaining how we've gotten the opinion of council that is not permissible. So, but I mean, David, please, if you'd like to share, your thinking on this. Can you hear me? I see you, but he seems to not be connected. Or he's just, well, this is nice. I shouldn't say that.
We just lost him there.
We can see
I don't think he liked the
can't.
comments. He's coming back. Let's see.
Oh yeah, I'm sure he is. So I don't, David, are you there now? Unmute, please, unmute.
Yeah, I'm fine. I had to just go off for 1 second.
Oh, no problem. As I had been explaining to the rest of the group, the situation that a secret ballot based on advice of counsel is not permitted, and it's not considered an internal matter. The results of an election are discoverable pursuant to a FOIL request, and that we must keep these records available just as we keep the records on any other votes that we take as a board.
Yeah, I was on the call with the attorney. I wasn't happy about it, and I disagree with it. But, it's not worth going 10 rounds on this. So let's just, I give up.
Right. Yeah. I mean, quite frankly, if we were to do this, we would have to expect that we would be challenged. And I don't know what that form would take, but the disruption to, just, and the added burden of having to deal with that doesn't strike me as a kind of fight I'd be willing to undertake. I mean,
we'll just wait for the next borough president, Brad, and we'll talk to him about it.
Okay, but I have to tell you, David, I did give a quick glance to the text that you sent me, and it does not appear, and at least on my initial reading, that the election results are permissibly excluded.
No, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say election results, Susan. It says.
I didn't say election results, but I'm saying it doesn't fall into the category of that type of information that is contemplated as being, not discoverable.
Okay, I understand. It doesn't specifically say that, but it does say that if I was just stretching the definition some, it did say if there was some business that you had for revealing who it was, and if it caused any harm, and it's what I was talking about. It does say if it causes any economic, which it doesn't, or social harm, or I forget the exact language. So, all right. So I just want to let it be. I think it's wrong. I think if it went to. So it's just worth fighting about.
I just want you to know, as a matter of interpretation, when you have language like this, it's always construed narrowly, because the purpose of the law is to provide access to information. Therefore, exceptions to the law are always looked at narrowly, and the burden is on the person or the entity seeking to exclude to show why it's excluded.
Yeah, I understand. But it did say that, anyway, it doesn't matter.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I think
I want to just move on, because it's not worth it.
So guys, just so the rest of the committee is clear. So what is the corrective action that needs to be taken on this, as far as what was voted on by the committee, by the board last month? And number two, how are we correcting this? Because it seems it's a substantive change, but it also, under the advice in council, it's not, doesn't follow the regulations, right? So
that we wrote, it says secret. If you strike the word secret, it's just a ballot. It's basically where we are. I don't think textually there's a big deal. So I think.
Strike the word. By the way, just for the record, I never liked the word secret. I always thought that the election should be up front. Only the name of the voter should be confidential. It wasn't
whatever the language is, but if you simply say ballot, it's a neutral term, and this way, whatever procedures we have will comply.
Okay.
So we just want to strike that word. Is that the corrective action? So what will be brought to the board as far as?
I think it should be a replace to open.
You wanted to say open ballot.
Because that's the change we're making.
Right.
Whether we agree with it or not, and I happen to agree. Well, I haven't brought it up because David is zealous, and I'm here for the ride. But I happen to agree with the borough president's reading of the text. But I think it's by open ballot.
Okay, not that I disagree with you, but if it doesn't say secret, the way you would interpret a bylaw that says simply ballot is that it's presumed to function consistently with the governing law, whatever. Therefore, by definition, it's open. And I don't know if I'm only cautious in the sense of, if you use the word open, what does that then mean? Does that then mean that you then have to say I'm voting for so-and-so, or simply that there's a record that someone can turn to at a later point?
No, because that would be a roll call.
Well, that's one form of it. But when you say open, does the word open carry certain responsibilities? What I'm saying is, if it simply says ballot, then you interpret ballot to mean it's done in a manner that's consistent with, whatever the governing law is.
I would say it's only defined that way if you define it that way in some definitions.
I don't want the word open ballot. I don't want a roll call vote. I'm sorry.
No. It's not a roll. An open ballot is not a roll call vote. That's the whole point.
It's open to interpretation.
Well, or we simply restore the language we had before, which was written ballot.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
Written ballot.
That's what
I mean,
we have.
David, that just goes back to the point that if it's a written ballot, it needs to be foiled, right? So it's not readily available, so to speak, unless somebody goes to the office and gets it. You know,
that's right. I mean, I really objected that, you know, Lincoln Anderson printed in the paper everybody's vote. I mean, I really thought that was a violation. You know, sorry. And Matt, I'm sorry if you disagree with that, but you know, I don't want to see how I voted for the chair or for anybody else printed in the paper. I'm sorry.
Well, anyway. Distasteful is different than improper.
That's
and
right.
So, and
that's right.
Distasteful is different than improper, and pretend secret is, you know, like I'd mentioned earlier, it's just not, you know, you just got to be upfront with it. It's available or it's not, you know, it's.
Yeah, in this case, David, the burden is on you to determine whether or not you're willing to endure this, frankly. Because
what? I didn't hear you.
Right, there is a right to have access to this information. Therefore, it's on any member of the board to determine whether or not they're comfortable with functioning under these rules.
I understand.
So,
I have a question. I mean, we're doing this virtually. I mean, we're not going to be in a building anytime soon. So if we're going to go back to saying it's written, how are we going to get that information read at the meeting by the time the meeting is ended if we're doing it virtually?
Well, that's the separate section. That's the electronic voting section of the bylaws. This is the in-person. And just so you guys are aware, as I've mentioned a number of times, you know, the borough president's office does not anticipate that we're going to be able to be meeting virtually indefinitely. They expect at some point that the governor will amend the executive order suspending the public officers law that allows us to meet virtually. So in fact, she even asked us, the general counsel, you know, why we were putting a subsection in for electronic voting, given that we probably would be meeting in person in a year. So I know everybody on the board has particular feelings about this, but the way they would have to actually change the law in order for us to continue meeting virtually if the emergency of COVID-19 is determined to have ended, you know, or some other situation arises where they figure out how people can, you know, meet safely in person to the satisfaction of the governor. So.
Well, I would like to point out, first of all, you know, we're hearing from top experts that, first of all, COVID may not be something until we're well into 2021 before we're actually able to sort of normalize. We've also got the fact that there are other, I mean, we have an election, but we can have a special elections this covers. I mean, the fact that even if we eventually go back to the way things were, it doesn't make this irrelevant. In fact, it sits in, it'll have value for a period of time.
Well, it has value as long as we can't meet in person. So there's no reason not to do it. I'm just saying that they pointed out to us, why are we, you know.
I don't understand that, because we would then have no mechanism to have an election.
No, what I'm saying, they were saying doing it as some temporary measure that's voted on, you know, not a
part of a bylaws that is in clear violation of the bylaws.
I'm just.
I'm not. This is the annoying.
I'm just repeating what Adele said, and I pointed out to Adele, you know, that the composition of community boards generally across the city, it skews older, and the diversity are people who are more at risk of meeting in person, and so, you know, as we get closer, I'm sure that there'll be a big push to continue to meet virtually or in some hybrid format. you know, but this is how we're trying to embrace this. And she said, fine. So it's, you know, I'm just pointing out
This is a totally.
This is more in response to Patricia's comment.
Right.
With respect to meeting in person. Patricia, the reason we want to correct it now is just so it's correct, you know, and isn't challenged, and just to be done with it, because right now we have a bylaws committee that's in process, and we just want to make sure that any changes we make are correct, you know, consistent, and then we just can move on, because this is a laborious process of just convening to discuss all these things generally. Right. So
it's something that we only do like once every 5 years anyway. And we don't know, you know, it's also possible some types of meetings may end up being in person and some may not. And it's like what we're doing is thinking proactively. And while I appreciate, you know, I certainly don't discount what Adele was saying. Frankly, you know, we live in a city where the government doesn't always think proactively. And if they did a better job that way, you know, this is just language. If we pass it and it turns out we don't need it, no big deal. At some point in the future, we could always vote to simply remove it because it is irrelevant. But it's there and it provides something down the road. And I think I look at the responsibility as trying to anticipate the needs. That's also why, frankly, we went and we promoted the idea of changing the election cycle. I mean, we had people challenging it, saying, oh, this is premature, we don't know, but we're working with what we've got now.
Yeah, but can I go back to what I said before? Are we going to point out that although we didn't really think this up on our own, that it existed elsewhere, that we saw this in other...
For which part?
You mean the secret ballot? Yeah.
We saw that other community boards were doing it.
I don't think we need to do that, because that's countering the argument. We're just trying to bring it in line with advice from the borough president's office. We
were inspired by specific experiences of certain of our board members, and we wanted to investigate the merit of it. And we looked at it, but now we've been informed that regardless, this is what the law is, and of course, we want that's it. End of story.
And
I'm not saying to say that in the community board. I'm asking if we have a duty to report that to the borough president. The disparity.
You mean that there are other
we've got.
I think we'd be doing them a favor, frankly, if we did, because they're operating outside of the law. And I'm sure they don't realize, no one's doing it intentionally, but it wouldn't hurt to point that out.
Does anybody have any recollection of which specific boards in Manhattan have secret elections?
I will look. I made a little chart.
Yeah, I've looked. I did not off the top of my head. I didn't record it.
I made a chart. Let me see if I
but I think that the issue is that David pointed out, it's if this is going to be an issue and it's challenged at some point, it's such a drawn out process, and without being able to justify it specifically now, it's best to amend it and then bring it back if somebody can figure out how to support the position that it is in fact proper. I mean, otherwise I'm not sure if anybody wants to spend the time doing that. I certainly beyond my capabilities, and I'm not an attorney, so
you have to really want to fight this one. And frankly, I think our energies are better spent on other things right now. At least I'm not prepared to fight that one.
So for means of just moving on then, so is everybody okay with just the proposed change being the written ballot as opposed to secret ballot?
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wait, I saw Kristen for 1 second.
Oh, just a peek, just a peek. Come on.
I was trying not to just be a voice. So yes, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
So we can move past this then? Is that
I
unanimous?
think it's time. I think it's time to go past it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
The other point had to do with the idea of in the electronic voting section, we have there's what's called the voting window, and it's the period of time in which our members are supposed to return or have their ballots time stamped in order for them to be recognized as valid, so that we don't have these trickling in and it's like the election occurs within a sort of a set period. As Adele pointed out, the way it reads right now, and I do agree with her, it appears that we have a window and then the window closes, but then we allow our district manager to reach out to those members whose ballots have not been received in order to determine whether or not they've actually voted. There's some technical problems so that we get all of our votes in. And the way it's written right now, it appears that that process, that part of the process is outside of the voting window, which would mean that technically those votes, even if collected, would be invalid. So I am going to modify the language to reflect that the voting window includes that. It does not close until after those calls have been made and either the votes have been collected or the person wasn't able to be reached. And that at that point, the voting window would close. So this way it's defined, and yet we're still making our best effort to reach out to all of our members.
So in essence, there's one longer voting period, but there are two separate sections to it, right? There's the first is by email, and then there's the second by phone, but it's all part of one longer voting period.
Right.
So that's, and we did, and so, and then the other element, which we don't need to put in the bylaws, but is to have sort of some feature in the email that is sent out to members that's unique, that comes back unique, like a PIN number or something, just so that nobody's spoofing emails. And that was a recommendation from the Borough President's office as well. And that's just that's sort of just a basic security feature.
Right.
For whatever.
I think we have to trust that, I mean, these are more technical things, and that's why we have them. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. It wasn't a requirement per se. It was more just in this day and age, we should have a feature built in to protect the sort of the integrity.
I will point out one of the benefits of having ballots that can be reviewed is that if there is a question, we could verify after the fact that, oh, somebody says, I don't understand how these results, came about based on who I voted for and based on who I know other people voted for. The fact is, if you have ballots that people can review after the fact, then that in itself is a kind of security. So,
right, and that's where having something unique, you can show a consistency that it was sent out with that identifier and then returned with that identifier, and so it's not just somebody spoofing email. I mean, I think she mentioned that that CB1 has some sort of. I mean, if we reach out to them. Yeah, they had a whole complicated system that they did. I'm not sure if our board office would be able to replicate the same technical savvy, but I will leave that to Bob. That's what the electronic voting, we really leave a lot of that discretion to the district manager as far as how they will do that. So I'd leave it to them to sort out.
Okay. So I think that's it. Was there anything else that I overlooked, Carter, in terms of what her concerns were?
Yeah, so the outside of that, so is everybody okay with that? Just making those amendments?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Just so we're clear, okay. The other thing was we I'd forgotten to talk to you about this before, Susan and I, was just how we're going to have the other group sort of how the bylaws committee wants to interact with a larger group of board members and just discussing, a code of conduct or whatever people would like that to be. So I was thinking that we have a separate meeting that is held where other board members can just chime in on that. I don't know if you want to put forward the examples to that group of what the other boards do and just have them comment on it and then come up with something that can then be presented to the board. But I'd like to have a broader input from the board and anybody who's interested, but at the same time not penalize anybody on the bylaws committee who doesn't want to participate in that process. I mean, I hope everybody would want to. And then, just to make sure that the voices of everybody on the board are included in this. And I think we need to do it, sooner than later, just because as we continue to meet on Zoom, it's good to have these protocols in place, just so everybody's on the same page, and it's really not that complicated. And I think it sort of sets the stage also for having a social media policy, as well as, any other types of policies that match our current day and age, but having those exist outside the bylaws. So I don't know if anybody has any ideas on that or.
Well, I would say that, yes, I agree with that idea. I don't feel it would be productive to share the whole document that I shared with the committee. I think that I'm going to try to prepare for our next meeting a set of outlines that we can discuss and sort of get a framework, and then take the framework to the larger board. It's a more constructive way to discuss this, and we'll have had a first chance at sort of,
putting together the rough bones.
I think that we can provide something by sort of creating some sort of a framework before, the larger audience takes a look.
Yeah, I'm just hoping, that we can move forward with it somehow, just at, in addition to the other bylaws, things that you may want to adjust. It's just sort of the time drags out. And I think that setting up that procedure of getting because that's involving a lot more people, just the sooner that happens, the better. And then we can put it behind us. I guess it doesn't seem all that complicated to me. So that's just why I'd rather, I speak too soon probably on that.
Famous last words. Famous last words. If you think this is complicated simply because it touches on people's emotions.
Sure. No, that's right. And I think that's now as we're settling in, even though we're still under the theoretical emergency of COVID, we're meeting this way, et cetera. We need to move forward with that because the conduct is important as people become more comfortable with this method of meeting. And also, I think that we're going to see more and more of the public joining us as we go forward. For example, in full board meetings, while the code of conduct governs board members and not the public per se, we're going to see more and more public members participate in sort of the public speaking portions of things. And we've already seen really large turnouts at our committee meetings, you know, on certain topics. So the better we get in sync with the way we run our meetings, the better off we are, and particularly if we have provisions for online meetings as well.
Mhm. Okay.
You know,
Well-
that's my thinking on that.
Okay.
Well, what's a reasonable turnaround time? I mean, what's your
Well,
expectation, Carter?
you know, I just, you know, because it's easy for board members to participate on Zoom and people are interested in this topic. You know, every time we have some big meetings, and this is maybe separate from the code of conduct and is maybe more, do we want to discuss further how we run online meetings? You know, for example, use of the chat, you know, setting up some procedures on what is acceptable for the public to comment on, what is not. Obviously, you know, I've said that during full board meetings, we don't allow the public to communicate with other public members of the public once we enter into our business session. And even then, it's questionable whether we should allow the chat from the public, because they would not be able to shout out during our in-person meetings or address the board with information. You know, that's just an example. So just getting some of that stuff
Unless
down.
invited to, Carter.
Right, that's right. And so it's, you know, getting some of that stuff down just as we continue to meet this way, it's just a good idea. It gets everybody on the same page. And, you know,
But I'm just asking what, I mean, Susan has kindly offered to put together some structure. So what's the turnaround that you would need? I mean, I don't know if she can meet that expectation.
No, right. So
clarify.
My point is that when we had initially envisioned doing this, that we would meet more frequently for shorter periods of time. So I'm just saying, staying on that idea of a schedule. So, you know, if the next time we're meeting is what, and I don't forget the exact dates.
I think aren't we meeting on the 21st?
Yes, right. So the 21st,
Yeah.
and then we can set up, you know, a public meeting afterwards. But I don't know if, Susan, what else you wanted to discuss on the 21st. So my point was just.
Well, the 21st is a meeting, that it would be the meeting at which we first discuss, you know, procedural code of conduct, that category of things. We haven't discussed it before. That's the first meeting at which I was hoping that we could establish that kind of a framework, so that once we have that, we can determine, first of all, do we want to meet a second time before we reach out to the board, or will be, and then we can, you know, decide. The 21st, you know, we could schedule something, I don't know, 10 days from that point, whatever, and add it to the calendar. But this way, I think we need to be more informed before we start scheduling.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm just saying that as we are settling into this new norm, it's really a good idea to get it, you know, these things down. So
we are. No, we definitely are. I mean, it was actually turned out to be a good thing that we didn't push for another meeting, a meeting on this even earlier, because we needed to discuss what we're discussing tonight. So a week from today, we will be talking about, we'll be moved on to our code of conduct, and then and we'll take it from there, and we'll decide what we want to do in terms of incorporating other voices.
And what else do you anticipate sort of being, you know, what other parts of the bylaws? I guess what I'm suggesting is that we should just map this out so that things can happen efficiently, you know, and if more than one thing can be handled at a meeting, just for everybody's own.
We can, I mean, if by mapping it out, you mean specific areas that we'd like to address, sure.
Right.
In terms of a map, in terms of like a timetable, yeah, I don't see that, because we just until we dig
I'm
in.
not saying specific timetable, just the order of what you want to address, so that.
For example, I will tell you right as I'm thinking about this, one thing that we need to address is public members.
Right.
You know, I might want to move there next. I also want to hear from anybody else here. Is there another topic that you think you'd really not only want to discuss, but is, you know, a particularly high priority?
Bernie, yeah. Well, we have been talking. I mean, public members is something that we, I know is something we have to talk about. So I think it's good. That's a good next step.
It's a good next step, but there are other areas that maybe, it's just something that becomes interesting since we're looking at the bylaws. It's not something you would bring up independently, but if we're there, we deal with everything.
Yeah. Exactly. I think this
Can
is
you,
the time to do it.
for the next meeting, there's a section called conflict of interest. Is that separated out? Maybe you can put that with the code of conduct so that you're getting two things done at the same time?
We can certainly do that. What a conflict of interest is actually something that is defined for us. We could, we can always set a higher bar, but it's something to discuss, and it's also something to clarify.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you're raising, Susan, because the conflicts of interest are not determined by the board.
Right.
They're determined by the conflict of interest board. They're not determined by CB2. And so the standards of what the COIB lays out are for board members. But where that comes into play, and I don't know in our bylaws, but it's a great point, Patricia, is that we should include it in our bylaws that all public members should have to adhere to the COIB regulations, which they don't now. Public members are not required or are not held to the same standards because they're not full board members, is my understanding. So you could have somebody who's a public member, taking action that a regular board member would not be able to, or could be sanctioned by a COIB for whatever those activities are. And we've had a number of board members over the years have been sanctioned, for various different things for COIB. But we don't, I think for the most part, determine what those rules are. And if we wanted to have a higher standard, we don't generally investigate ourselves, right? And I don't have any recollection. I don't know if David does. I don't even recall any board member being removed by vote of the board or the executive committee, which would.
That's an interesting question, because I question.
I don't recall anything like that either.
Whether we have the authority to do that. There are boards talking about other areas that you might want to discuss. I know when I looked at other boards' bylaws, there were some that did vest in the board the right to remove members. I don't know if we have that authority. That may be, another ultra vires choice that, we don't appoint. How can we have the right to remove?
I think we can recommend to the board. I mean,
we can recommend.
For a president. I think that's in there, but I think Patricia raises a good point. We should investigate that. That's a good thing to go along with this.
Excellent. It's excellent. These are just the kind of things. Yeah. These are just
a good reminder. It's actually a good to bring up, because it's a good reminder to all the board members that there is in fact, the conflicts of interest, and it's never a bad thing to bring it up. It's the rules have jammed up even the best educated amongst board members by not being aware of just how serious the rules are and the thinking behind what would be improper, right? So
and I have sat on committees where public members recused themselves, saying they had a conflict of interest, taking the most conservative or cautious step, and was appreciated.
As we would hope, they do, right? As we would hope they do, but we should codify that.
I think it's also important that for the comfort of our appointed board members, because sometimes people feel like, oh, they're sitting in committees with public members and they have a voice, and they're not. We want them to know that these people are being held to the same standards. You know. So, but anyway, that's for another, that's down the road, but I think we know where we're heading, which is great. And I will circulate that changed language so that you guys can all see it, both in terms of what we discussed tonight, in terms of the election, and then I will circulate something for next week's meeting. So we can keep moving forward as our taskmaster insists.
And just and Patricia, or if anybody else, if you're looking through the bylaws, if you can just shoot an email to Susan and I as well with the specifics, just so we can, you know, just so we can just keep that, so we're better prepared. I should have spoken to Susan about this before, but I'd forgotten to. So.
Okay. Will do.
Okay.
One of the, sorry.
Go ahead, Matt.
No, one of the things I just wanted to bring up, if we're ready to partially move on, is just a separate topic idea, which is rules of order, kind of a broader topic that I know everybody will yawn at, except for me. In the sense that I think some of the issues that we see could maybe not be resolved, but be resolved better through the proper mechanisms of parliamentary procedure. And so the idea that if somebody does say something offensive, you don't, you know, open up and, you know, start screaming racist, you know, rise and say, you know, Mr. Chairman, point of order. At which point the mechanism, the process can you know, the system can wind its way through. But it gets to a bigger point, which I'm going to come back to, which is we don't really follow the whole amendment process very strictly when bringing up resos. And this is not connected to code of conduct, you know, whatever, but it is parliamentary procedure in the sense that, you know, when a chair gives a, you know, presents a reso, the chair then loses, whoever is presenting the reso no longer controls that reso. Once they read it to the board, it's in front of the board. And so the whole idea of, now we can write a rule that says this is allowed, but the whole idea of like a friendly amendment, once the person has started reading it, and discussion has started, is a little dicey. On the flip side, there have been many a times where two people have agreed about a change, and those two people, I don't think, realize that if one of them said, I move to amend the reso this way, and the second one said, I second, it forces a vote on the amendment. Yeah. And so, I don't know, Susan, you can take over.
No, I was just saying, you know, this is a really good point. We sort of make assumptions about what the rules are. And since we do the same thing from meeting to meeting, we've kind of have an unofficial, you know, set of rules of order, you know, and you're right, we're not bound by Robert's rules. Robert's rules, according to our bylaws, is a default. However, it would be, if, you know, we should make a decision whether or not we're going to truly use Roberts as a default, or we're going to identify those areas where we've developed our own procedure and we'd like to keep our procedure because it works for us. And we find it's effective, and yet it's transparent and it's fair. And we may want to say, you know, if that would not be a bylaws thing, but that would be a rules of order, you know, provision that's part of our sort of governing documents.
So understanding rules, yeah.
Yeah, and to go back, you know, what we're talking about when we talk about code of conduct, I totally agree with you. I happen to like the idea that when we can deal with an outburst or a conflict through procedure, it's, first of all, it's more neutral. It doesn't go to substance, and it provides consistency, which is something I think is very important. People need to know that when, for example, there's an outburst, it's dealt with the same way every time, no matter what the substance, no matter who the speaker is. It's like those are the rules by which we function. So,
you know, it's interesting because, like Matt, I do boring things and look at things as they relate to the board.
that's why you're on this committee.
I've
to some extent, that's why we're here.
been reading past resolutions of the board from long ago in just conjunction with looking up some other stuff. And it's interesting that one of the past chairs, who I can't remember, in the 90s, or maybe it was in the 80s, had pointed out, and it was recorded in the minutes, that the resolutions are not the chairperson's resolutions, they're the committee's resolutions. And it was an interesting distinction. I'd have to go back and look at it, but Matt just reminded me of that. And you know, it is a point that is good to keep in mind, because it does create that order, right? Of just, you know, Matt, do you think it would take more time, you know, or less time to conduct a meeting if we were to change our procedures that we have now?
Oh, I think it would take a lot more time.
Way more.
But
Way more.
I'm being polite and bringing it up, so that's why I just...
The easy solution is that we codify it.
Right.
Or what you can do is accept it as like the blue slip rule in terms of judicial appointments, which is that everybody knows that it is not codified, that this is not technically how it goes, and that if somebody were to force it, they could force it a different way, but that this is how, out of respect, how we deal with it. And that way I'm fine with too. It's just as long as we're clear about the rules, I'm happy.
I mean, Carter, do you think it would make sense to have some sort of a working group sit down and just look at parliamentary procedures so that we know where we stand? Or is that too much?
If there are enough people willing to volunteer to do it, I mean, that's
I went to that.
You know, not
seminar.
something that if I'm asking board members.
Matt confessed to being, you know.
I mean, if we
I'm gleeful at the proposition. But the problem is it will be a Zoom of me looking at me.
That's kind of my, you know.
I mean, I probably would do it just because I am something of a procedure. I mean, I'm a great believer in it. It's how you don't get justice if you don't have the order, the mechanism for which to provide it.
Yeah, and it goes also to the point that, you know, Robert Rules of Order is there to protect the minority, right? Not the majority. And it sort of goes to the same thing that I often find myself in conflict with the board, because people are interested in time, which is allowing everybody to speak before a conversation is shut down. And so, you know, having that discussion with how that relates to Robert's rules and having the board's own position on that is probably a good thing, because that really changes with the chair.
You know, I have to say, one of the things I really don't like, when I don't make a big thing out of it because it isn't Roberts, is when someone decides, they just kind of wake up and decide they're going to call
the question.
Call the question, even though
That's right.
We're in the middle of a very erudite discussion, and it's not like just four people we talking 3 or 4 times, but there are people who have their hands up waiting to be called on, and I want to hear what they have to say. And I don't know why. I mean, there's something that happened a few months ago with somebody, I don't need to pinpoint that person, who I thought was completely inappropriate to call the question. You know, and
remember, that is simply a call for a vote, and according to Roberts, requires a 2/3 vote to end discussion.
Right, but by practice, Suzanne.
Well, that is a problem.
That's a problem, but you know, you have the chair looking out. You know, we in the audience don't see everything that's going on, but the chair does. And you know, when I was chair, there were times, you know, I just overruled it and I got yelled at. But I want people to have a chance to talk. I don't want to take a vote. You know, it's the same thing with term limits. Anytime you put term limits on a ballot, you know, in an election, I knew that we were going to get term limited out on the community board, because there isn't a time when there was a term limit referendum that term limits did not get, you know, knocked off. So it's the same thing. I feel strongly that if we're in the middle of a discussion and the chair is sitting there looking and seeing people waiting to talk, that we ought to let them.
Then David, this would be an example. This would be an example of something that is an exception that we codify.
That's right. I understand. I'm just
That's
bringing
it.
So I want to extend the meeting here, Susan. See, that's why I'm bringing it up now.
So Matt, do you and Susan, do you envision that that's the appropriate place that those discussions would happen on that subset? I mean, what do you guys, how do we do that? I mean, is that something that happens in this committee? Is that something that we put something else together?
It's not this committee. It connects to this committee, but it's not this committee. We have enough.
No, it's not this committee.
No.
So you're not volunteering, is that?
I didn't say I wasn't volunteering. I'm saying I'm not volunteering.
Well, are you saying that you are volunteering? Like, what is it?
David volunteered.
No, Matt, you can carry the water.
If David's volunteering, I'm out.
So I think if you guys, Matt and Susan, if you guys want to work on just sort of creating some context of that and some parameters, you know, what would be discussed, I'm more than happy to do that. I think it's actually a good idea, because then it really lays out, you know, on a more less formal basis, right? How, you know, a mindset of how we want our meetings to be guided.
Right.
And you know, maybe even being less specific, but just saying what the objectives are. Maybe that even is the result of the committee, right? That a spirit that's captured, meaning, you know, a comment on not necessarily how it's accomplished, but that, you know, anybody has at least one opportunity to speak on a topic before the discussion is closed, or as an opportunity to respond. You know, we don't have to dive into the details, but something that as a board that we can agree on, so that, you know, people don't get steamrolled through something and just shut out.
We don't know what, you know, until we look at the rules and what they provide, we don't know where we're veering, you know, we've deviated from them, what, you know, what we want to enhance them with. That's something I don't recall us ever as a board doing.
What's that?
Really looking at Roberts and saying, how do we want to run our meetings in terms of,
we haven't looked at that.
We've never done this.
I can tell you why. I mean, that's because we're meeting virtually now. It's a lot easier to get to these meetings. And if somebody had to physically go somewhere to talk about this a number of times during the month and go sit in some room somewhere, I'm not sure you could find many volunteers.
And Claudia, you're sitting in your underwear, I take it, right? So it's very easy now.
Right. Yeah, we only take you seriously because we see you from the chest up. Yeah, we know that one.
Well, we don't even see you, David. I mean,
no, because
I don't even.
And just to prove to you that I'm here.
We did see him. We did see him.
Oh, we did see you. Yeah. I mean, your shirt looks.
Okay, are we done here?
I think we've gotten a lot done. You know, balls in my court to like send some stuff back to you guys, but we know where we're heading. We have a sense of where we're heading, which is great. And
I'd like to be able to present and share this with the board as soon as possible, just so nobody's surprised at the full board meeting.
Well, you can certainly, as part of your chair's report, discuss that these are the topics that we're contemplating.
Yeah. Well, and have you discussed it?
But just as this is what we're looking at, and please pay attention to the calendar, looking for, you know, the topics for upcoming meetings.
Yep.
Oh, right. I meant as far as for the changes to the that we're you know, presenting this month. I just want people to have enough time to. So if we put together something, you know, that we can just email out tomorrow. I mean, if you know, whatever it is.
Okay, yeah, no, I mean, I will have something for you to email out tomorrow, maybe like end of day tomorrow. But you know, this is not, I mean, first of all, the whole, like, the ballot thing is simply a restoring to the, you know, the way it was. And the other one is a more technical, you know, I don't think it's going to be something that's it's not volume-wise much to look at. So
Who
I
knows?
don't,
There's famous last words, right? It could,
you know, if you keep throwing that
you know, we
stuff
get
back
it
at
out.
me, we're gonna have problems.
Okay.
All right.
I'm gonna take
Okay, guys?
I'll see you all.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thanks.
Good
Take care.
night.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Everybody. Bye.
Night.
Hi, everyone.
Matt,
Yeah,
I'm gonna
David, you want to stay on and talk parliamentary procedure?
Sure.
Oh my God. I gotta get a refill before I like do that. It's like,
No,
what?
man, I'm just gonna send you some stuff on foils and stuff that
Excited.
you'll find interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Interesting, interesting. I've had enough.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Good night. Good night.
Bye.
See you all.
See ya.